We're not lawyers, and Reza and I could not hope to give you a full course on legal English on a half-hour podcast. But today we'll do our best to cover basic vocabulary in this very legal episode of
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
I'm Craig.
And hi, I'm Reza.
And if you're a new listener to the podcast, you're very welcome. In this podcast, Reza and I, both English teachers of 45 years of teaching experience, are going to help you perfect your pronunciation, grow your grammar, and vocalize your vocabulary.
And generally take your English up to the next level.
Yeah, so hopefully you'll be better at English after listening to us for a while. How are you doing, Reza?
I'm doing very well, Craig. I'm enjoying the autumn. And what about you?
I love this time of year. Here in Spain, it's sunny, it's warm, but it's not too hot. There's lovely, lovely weather at this time of year. So, yeah, that's making me feel very good. Beginning the podcast this week, we have a voice message from Lionel from Mexico. So here's Leo.
Hi, Rosa. Hi, Greg. This is Lionel from Mexico. I live in Guanajuato, Mexico. I'm a big fan of your work. Guys, I think you are amazing. I have learned a lot with your podcast. And I like to tell you that I consider you are a master, Reza, and you are a master, Greg, in the art of teaching English. If you can give us some advice to improve our skills about talking or how to think in English, would be nice. See you guys and have a nice day.
Well, thank you very much, Leo. That's very, very kind of you to say those things. Any comments on the message, Reza?
Thanks very much, Leo. We love your flattery. Piropos. You're calling us masters of teaching English? Wow. Thank you very much.
It was master and not bastard, wasn't it?
Yeah, you didn't say bastard, did you? We misheard you.
Thank you very much. You're very kind. Leo asks for some tips and advice on how to improve his speaking. Well, we did kind of speak about this before, answering a question from Leon. That was back on episode 169, speaking about how you can improve your English and speak more like a native speaker. So to hear our reply to Leon's question, go to inglespodcast.com/169. So we're going to repeat things that we have mentioned in the past. Leo, maybe this will help you. Reza, how can he improve his English? What tactics can he use?
Well, the first thing is, Leo, this might sound strange, but talk to yourself in English. Yeah. If you talk to yourself in Spanish, in Mexico, people will think you're crazy. But if you talk to yourself in English, they'll hopefully understand, he's practicing his English.
Or is a crazy Englishman.
It could be as well, yeah. But I imagine you probably don't want to do this in a busy place. You probably want to do this in a quiet spot, perhaps on your own. Talk to yourself so that you hear what sounds you're producing, and you might identify your own mistakes and know what you need to correct.
And also go into the bathroom or wherever you have a mirror in your house and just talk into the mirror. Talk to yourself. That also helps you to improve your body language, your eye contact, using your hands while you speak to express yourself in English. So why not practice in front of a mirror, which is great because you don't need anybody else to be with you while you're doing it.
Also, record yourself. I imagine you have a smartphone and you can record audio on that. If not, you can probably do it on your computer. Record it and keep those recordings for a while. Play them back, but don't get rid of them. Keep them. And over the months and years, you'll notice how you get better. You'll be able to listen to the old recordings and think, oh, wow, did I really used to speak like that? And you'll notice that you get better. And it's very good for your self-confidence.
And you can repeat the same thing several times. Just write down some bullet points or some very, very rough notes about something and speak for a couple of minutes and then listen back and try to improve the first recording by improving your pronunciation, your fluency, your expression and your stress. Just try to sound better each time and slowly you'll be increasing your ability and your fluency.
Read out loud. When you're reading a text, say from a newspaper, a book, a magazine, something on internet, why not, sometimes at least, read out the actual words? This is extremely useful because reading English has a great difficulty which doesn't really exist in Spanish. Not wishing to insult the Spanish language at all, but reading aloud Spanish is really easy. Once you've learned Spanish, you just read what's there. You might think, claro, porque voy a hacer? Of course you read what's there. What I mean is the letters tell you what to read, and there's no great mystery. You learn what possible sound or sounds can come from each letter, and, well, do it, read that. But of course, English doesn't work like that, does it? The letters in English don't tell you the sound. They don't tell you the pronunciation. So when you see the word read, for example, you might be tempted to say read, but it isn't, is it? It's read. So in English, there are lots and lots of tricks. So the more you practice that, the better your pronunciation comes. I always say, particularly to my lower level students, when you read aloud means in voz alta. When you read aloud or read out loud, read what you know, not what you see. You know that the word leer in English is pronounced read. It's not read. And you know that el mar is see, not sea. And you know that pour is through and not through. So
can you clean the microphone, please?
Just let me take my spit off the microphone there, my saliva. But I often find, particularly with lower levels, that people forget and they see these words and they read it as if it were Spanish. And they say, oh, I love the sea in the Mediterranean. No, the sea. And they remember, oh yeah, it's sea. So it's actually very useful to read aloud in English and correct yourself.
Absolutely. Also, Leo, listen and repeat. Listen and repeat. Take your favorite TV series or your favorite podcast, or even this one, and just take a very small part of it, maybe 10 or 15 seconds, listen to it and repeat it. Try to copy the pronunciation, the intonation, the stress, etc., the linking sounds of the audio. And you can do that with any TV series or film that you enjoy, any classic quote from any movie. Play it in original version, repeat it, do it again and again. That will help you to improve your speaking.
Possibly one of the best things of all is to go to language exchanges, intercambios, in other words, in your area or wherever you happen to be, maybe even if you're traveling, I guess, go to language exchanges and speak preferably to native speakers. So in a language exchange, it might be, for example, that an English-speaking person will speak to you in English for half an hour, let's say, and then they expect you to speak to them in Spanish for half an hour. So they improve their Spanish, you improve your English, and it's free, usually.
One way you can find a group is to go to the meeting.com website, where you can find groups of people meeting and speaking about different subjects in your area. And if there is not one, you can't find one. If there isn't one in your area, why not start a group with friends or work colleagues or anybody you know in your area who might be interested in practicing with you? Why not meet for a coffee for an hour a week or a beer for 2 hours, 3 hours a week and practice English in a small group with people you know? And if you fix it a day and a time that people can come, then it becomes a regular speaking practice activity that you have created.
If you prefer to stay in the comfort of your own home, you could find a teacher online. These days, you can have lessons via Skype, of course. So you can look in various places, We've mentioned in the past italki, for example, and there are other forums where you can get in touch with teachers and speak to them at any time you like. You can book a time and use Skype, and you might even be able to do a language exchange online, which could be free.
And really, you need to look no further, which means it's not necessary to go más allá. Look no further, because just send us a voice message. Go to speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast, record your voice. You have a maximum of 90 seconds and send it to us. If you want to speak for longer, attach an MP3 file to an email. Send it to me, Craig, at inglespodcast.com. You can do this on your smartphone, but you do need to download the SpeakPipe application. Or if you have a computer or a laptop, you can do it directly into your computer on the website. Next, a quick comment to Alberto Gallego from Australia, who you may remember because we answered 2 or 3 of Alberto's questions quite recently, but we did not answer his question about the comma. Now, I don't know what you think, Reza, but maybe speaking about punctuation on a podcast might be a little bit boring because punctuation tends to be visual. So what I've done, Alberto, is I've put a link, 2 links to 2 places that I think you will find useful. And both of these places explain how to use the comma in English and also the differences between the way Spanish speakers use the comma and English speakers use the comma. One link is our friend Monica Stocker. Her blog, El Blog del Inglés, has a very nice article in Spanish about uses of the comma in both languages. And there's also a very useful reference page on EF website, which is Education First. Links to both of those are on the website at inglespodcast.com/231.
You'll notice something curious about punctuation when you look particularly at Monica's blog. She explains very well the difference between British and North American punctuation. There are a few slight differences. If you look at the Education First link, I think that they're only using specifically American punctuation, but Monica points out the differences. For example, when you have a list of things, in American English, they put a comma before the final and, whereas in British English, we usually don't. Yeah. So don't think it's wrong if you see it sometimes and sometimes you don't. Depends on whether it's British or American. Also, there's a famous and surprisingly funny book, because usually you wouldn't think punctuation is going to be funny. A very famous book, in fact, about punctuation called Eats, Shoots and Leaves, written by Lynn Truss. And there's a link in the show notes about that book as well. She actually makes the subject funny. I don't know how she does that, but somehow she does.
It's a very good book. I've read it, but I think it might be for more advanced level learners of English. Yeah. Perhaps in the future we can ask Anna Wright to come back on the podcast and speak a little about punctuation, because she specializes in teaching and giving presentations about punctuation.
Yes. Watch this space.
Yeah. ... Punctuation. Next, we have a suggestion from our friend Lucas Antonio on Patreon, who we also heard from quite recently. And Lucas Antonio asks specifically about legal English. Reza, can you read what Lucas wrote on Patreon?
He says, I have been trying to watch some legal series on Netflix, and I noticed my lack of vocabulary there. Right, yes. So that's interesting. It sounds like he's not a lawyer, that he just purely enjoys TV series about lawyers or legal problems or maybe even police investigations, that type of thing. Yeah, so do I. Good point. They use quite a lot of specific technical vocabulary.
They do, and if you are the kind of person who enjoys watching legal TV series like Suits, etc., then you might find this vocabulary useful, as you will if you're a lawyer, probably. We did speak about crime vocabulary back in episode 48 quite a while ago. So if you want to go and listen to that for some more vocabulary, go to inglespodcast.com/48. But here today, we're going to go a little deeper into legal vocabulary.
Yeah. If you're a lawyer, of course, we can't give you all the detail you like, as we said at the beginning of the podcast, because that's why lawyers study for years and years and years and years and years at university, because there's a lot of technical information. But we are just going to give you the information which is useful for non-lawyers.
So the first important thing, as we said in episode 48, be careful of the pronunciation of lawyer, L-A-W-Y-E-R, lawyer, not liar, which is L-I-A-R. Those two words are quite commonly mispronounced. And there are two types of lawyers, aren't there?
Well, Craig, basically the two types of lawyers in any case. What are the two sides?
There's a defense lawyer who obviously defends you in a criminal trial, and a prosecutor who kind of attacks you. The prosecutor's the one who attacks you.
Yes, lawyer is a very general word. It's basically for any of these people who appear in court cases. But there are some more specific words, which we'll talk about in a minute. As Craig said, someone might attack you. For example, in a divorce, your lawyer is going to defend you and say you were brilliant and say that your ex-husband or wife was not so brilliant. But it's not a crime to be having a divorce case. It's a case of civil law. So in that case, you would have a civil law lawyer, or perhaps a better word, civil law solicitor working for you. A solicitor is a type of lawyer.
I think solicitor will be more common in British English. I don't think American English speakers would use solicitor very much.
No.
So, as Reza said, civil law like divorce, and criminal law is another kind of law, and that would involve crimes like murder, rape, arson. Burning down buildings is arson. So those really serious criminal crimes you'd be defended or prosecuted by a criminal lawyer.
However, if it's a serious case of criminal law, you might need a barrister.
Or a barrister.
Yes, if you need to drink a lot of coffee. But in the actual courtroom, B-A-R-R-I-S-T-E-R, a barrister is not someone who works in a cafe, but it's someone who represents someone in the actual courthouse. The solicitor cannot do the same work as a barrister in British English. In American English, it's more flexible. One person can do all the work, the lawyer. But in British English, in some serious cases, criminal cases, a solicitor contacts a barrister, and the barrister is the one who actually speaks in the courthouse. And I don't know if it's changed, but barristers are the ones which wear the strange wigs, las pelucas.
Yeah.
In the courthouse, as well as the person in charge, the judge. But the barristers in British courts, I think, also get to wear the funny wig, la peluca.
That's right. And another point is that the barrister would have less contact with the client than the solicitor. So, as Reza said, the solicitor instructs the barrister, and the barrister doesn't really have much contact and much conversation with the actual person in the trial or court case.
Be careful with the word advocate, because you might think advocate, A-D-V-O-C-A-T-E. Oh, that's abogado. Looks a bit like avocado, must be lower. Well, maybe. Yeah, a lawyer is a type of advocate, but there are other types of advocate. For example, Craig is an advocate for driverless cars.
That's right.
He thinks they're a good idea. Mm-hmm. He's an advocate. He would speak publicly to defend driverless cars. He would advocate them. So he's an advocate. So we're not talking in a legal sense. We just mean that in public, he's prepared to defend that idea.
That's right. I'm just in favor of the idea of driverless cars. And advocate, I'm not sure if it's changing over time. I know that advocate used to be a lot more common in American English. You'd have advocate to law perhaps on a business card. But I think advocate you also come across, which means you also find quite commonly now in British English. So it's one of those words that's crossed over the Atlantic and is being used more in the UK. So just remember that an advocate is a lawyer, but as Reza said, it can also mean that you're in favour of something.
It can also be a verb, but strangely the pronunciation changes. So if you're a person, you're an advocate, but what you do is that person advocates for something. So that the vowel sound actually changes. So Craig advocates for driverless cars. Craig is an advocate for driverless cars. Different pronunciation.
That's right. Judge, you may know, is juez or jueza. Just be careful of the pronunciation of judge. It's the j sound, like January, June, Jeremy, July. Judge.
There's another type of judge, which in the UK people call a magistrate, but it's only for less important crimes. So if there's a big murder case, someone's killed another person illegally, it will definitely be a judge in charge. But for things like if someone has perhaps been drinking while under the influence of alcohol or something like that, it might be a magistrate who deals with that in the UK. But they don't use that word in America.
And if there is a serious case, a case is a legal action, something that needs to be decided legally, then it will go to court. The expression to go to court. And there may be a trial, which is juicio. You can be on trial for something. For example, he's on trial for murder, or she's on trial for forgery, for example.
Yes, and the word court has other meanings, I'm sure you've heard. A tennis court, a squash court, una pista, there's something. That's another meaning of court.
A defendant is acusado, acusada. So somebody who defends themselves is the defendant or is defended by a lawyer.
Yes, so they defend against the prosecution. And in some cases, it will be the jury, jurado, the jury, a group of, often it's 12 people in most countries, who decide who's telling the truth, the prosecution or the defense.
And there are some verbs, some legal verbs, which can be tricky because of the meaning of the verbs used in a legal context, but also because of the dependent prepositions, the prepositions you need to use, and the grammar. Where do you put the object? For example, our first one is to accuse. Now, you accuse someone of doing something. So it's accused plus object, plus of, plus gerund. I accused him of stealing the money, for example. Or the police accused my wife of drink driving.
And if the police accuse someone of doing something, then they might try that person for doing that. To try someone means to make them go to court to prove their innocence. You try them to see if they're telling the truth. Give it a try.
So that's not intentar.
No, it's to put someone on trial for something. In other words, make someone go to court. To put someone on trial for something. Juzgar.
And if the judge decides that you're guilty, for example, and maybe you have to pay a fine, una multa, or go to prison, you can appeal. And you appeal against something. You appeal against the decision. You appeal against the verdict, which is the decision of the judge.
So first, the police arrest you for something. Then, if they think there may be evidence, they charge you with something. That means they're going to make you go to court to prove your innocence. They charge you with something. And if the judge decides you're guilty, then he or she will convict you of something or of doing something. And if you're convicted, then you are now a convict. That's a person who has been convicted. In other words, you have a conviction. But as Craig said earlier, you could appeal against the decision. you could say, well, I think I've been unfairly convicted. The trial hasn't been conducted correctly, or new evidence has appeared, and I'm going to appeal against the decision.
And if you are not found guilty, the expression to find someone guilty, if you are not found guilty, that's the passive, then you can say that you are cleared of doing something. Now, to clear someone of doing something, you could also use the verb to acquit, ACQUIT, to acquit. He was acquitted of the murder, for example, or he was acquitted of the theft. The noun of acquit is acquittal, 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 the opposite of conviction. If you ever go into a court, then you might hear the defendant making a plea. For example, the judge will say to the accused, "What do you plea? Guilty or innocent?" Your plea is what you are saying to the judge if you're guilty, if you think you're guilty or not guilty. So that's your plea. You can plead guilty or plead innocent or not guilty. If you are a witness in a trial and you lie, you commit perjury, which is also a crime. So if you're saying something in court that's not true, then you could be accused of perjury, of committing perjury.
Another course of action, legal action, you can take against someone. If you don't want them to go to prison, you could sue them. That means you want to get money from them. So if you file a suit, or in other words, you sue, S-U-E, someone, or you file a suit against someone, that's demandar. So they've done something that they shouldn't, and you think they should give you money.
And I said before that you could be a witness in a court case. If you do have to go to court and you are a witness, you will probably be asked to take the stand. Now, the expression to take the stand means you go to a special place in the courtroom and you have to swear, usually on the Bible. Is it still on the Bible?
I think it is, yeah.
I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And then you give your testimony. You testify in court. That's taking the stand as a witness. So you testify in court.
After the hearing, so when everything has been heard by the judge, the jury, and everyone else, then the judge will pass sentence. In other words, decide that the defendant is guilty or not guilty. So sentence is veredicto or sentencia. Be careful, of course, another meaning of sentence in English grammar means una frase.
So, lots of vocabulary, lots of words and expressions connected to legal English. We hope that's helped you, Leo, with watching TV series. Reza, do you watch any TV series about law and crime? I know that Suits is very popular because that stars the wife of our prince.
Oh, really?
Is it Megan?
Megan somebody, yeah.
She was a star. Probably not now. She's part of the royal family, but she was a star in a very popular legal American TV series called Suits.
Oh, I didn't know that. I've heard of the series, but I didn't know that she was a star in it. The series that I'm watching at the minute is Better Call Saul.
Ah, right. And he's an advocate, isn't he? He's a lawyer.
He's a lawyer, yeah.
But not a very good one.
He's not at all. Well, you could argue about that. He's certainly not conventional. He has been known on many occasions to bend the law. B-E-N-D, make a curve. In other words, he does things which are not strictly 100% legal to achieve his aims. Mm-hmm. I wonder if any of the rest of you know Better Call Saul. It's very funny, actually.
And he was in Breaking Bad, wasn't he? He was the lawyer who defended in Breaking Bad.
Yeah. It's quite funny why it's called Better Call Saul, because this lawyer decided to call himself Saul Goodman, which is a short version of it's all good, man.
Oh, yes.
He said, it's all good, man. So he reduced it to Saul Goodman.
I didn't realize that. That's true.
Apparently in the series, the character's called Jimmy McGill or something like that. So when people meet him, they quite often say in a racist way, they say, oh, Saul Goodman. Goodman, typical Jewish lawyer. He says, no, get away. I'm Irish. It's Saul Goodman.
If you're interested in looking at that or other TV series about crime, I'll try to find a few examples and put the links in the show notes so that you can watch them on your TV or on Netflix or wherever you watch TV series.
Now, Craig, what is the difference between crime and sin?
I would say crime is very much is kind of man-made and that's legal, isn't it? And sin I connect to religion and moral values.
Do you think sins should be considered crimes?
Many of them are. Murder, adultery. No, that's not a crime.
Oh, well, it is in some countries, actually.
Is it?
In Iran and Saudi Arabia, it is. It's illegal. Do you think they've got the right idea? Should it be illegal here?
Should adultery be illegal? Oh, I don't know. What do you think, listeners? Do you think adultery means sleeping with somebody outside of your marriage? If you do that, could you go to prison? What do you think? Let us know.
In Iran and Saudi Arabia and some countries, you can. It's actually illegal. You would have to get a lawyer if you were caught sleeping with someone who wasn't your husband or wife.
Are there any other sins that are legal?
Yes.
Well, greed.
Hoping that terrible things happen to certain people, which I often think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, like when you see somebody going far too fast down the road in a car and they almost knock you over, someone, and I kind of think, I hope they have an accident.
But that's
a sin.
It's also illegal.
No, I hope they have an accident.
So it's not the speed that's the point. It's yeah.
As a pedestrian, they nearly hit me and they're going too fast and they don't care. And I think, if you were to go around the corner now and I would hear that noise, I might like that. So that's a sin, but I do think...
If you had the superpower to let them have a small accident, would you use it?
Yeah, depending on the person, I would, yeah. But of course, only they and no one else would be harmed in the accident.
Oh, no, not seriously.
Not seriously, but just something to scare them a bit, to make them slow down.
Yeah.
Craig, have you ever been involved in any legal action yourself?
Yes. A long time ago, I was riding my bicycle, and somebody in the road, and somebody opened the car door without looking. And I went straight into the car door and I flew over the top of the bicycle and over the top of the car door. Ooh. And badly hurt my leg, badly hurt my arm, went to hospital, and I sued the woman for damages because she did not offer to take me to the hospital. She did not really apologize. She just...
Did she blame you? Blame is culpable.
She did not blame me. But she wasn't helpful at all and just left me to get a taxi to the hospital. And I took her to the small claims court, which is not a trial. It doesn't involve, obviously, trial lawyers and judges. You just take your case to a small court, very small public court, and they offered to repair my bicycle by her cost. So she had to pay for my bicycle costs and damages. So I got some extra money for her in consideration. So I won the case.
And at the hearing in the small claims court, was she apologetic then?
She wasn't there.
Oh,
she sent a solicitor.
Okay.
She sent a lawyer.
So you won the case?
So, yep, I won the case. And it was only a couple of €100, but morally I felt justified. I felt that justice had been done. What about you? Have you been involved in a case?
No, I don't think so. Never. Not to my knowledge.
Long may it continue. I hope that continues to be the case. Or not to be the case.
Now, Craig, some lawyers have a reputation that's associated with them of only trying to maximize their profit. For example, in divorces, it is said that some lawyers want the divorce case to last a long time because they charge by the hour. And the longer they work for you, the more money. Is that true? Do they really deserve that reputation?
Oh, I don't know. That's a very good question. I have no personal experience. I think they deserve to be well paid because they study for many years. They have to know the law and they do good work. But it's probably the same in every profession. I think there's probably some good lawyers that have good morals and don't overcharge, and maybe some not so good ones. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a mixture. I remember growing up in Ireland in the 1970s and even the 1980s, there were lawyers who, for moral reasons, would not handle divorce cases because they did not believe in divorce. They could have made a lot of money, but because morally they didn't accept the idea of divorce, they wouldn't take on such cases. Hard to believe because divorce cases are easy money for lawyers.
Because they last so long usually.
Yeah, but I heard of stories of lawyers who wouldn't do divorces for ethical issues.
How do you think the legal system could be improved in this country?
In Spain,
Yeah.
it could just be a lot less bureaucratic. It seems excessively bureaucratic here. There seems to be a lot of stages, a lot of processes to go through just to do the simplest thing.
Yeah.
Spain is a more legalistic society than the UK, I think. People think more about legal processes and legal actions in Spain than they do in the UK, I would think.
Although there does not seem to be as many civil cases, and I mean cases against companies that might be endangering public health, for example, civil suits, as they say in America. There don't seem to be the suing culture here in Spain that there is in America, for example. So there don't seem to be as many of those cases where you'd fall over in a supermarket because the floor's wet. Well, that's the responsibility of the supermarket. They should be sued.
Yeah, because I think people know in the vast majority of cases, they won't get anywhere. In Spain, those cases virtually never flourish.
Do you think that's right, that should be the case?
No, but it is the case. So in Spain, there's a lot of legal action in other respects, but as far as suing big companies or even things like the council or local government or central government, people don't do it much because they rarely have success. Whereas in the United States, people know that quite often you can be successful in those cases and get a lot of money. Just because you burned yourself on a plate in McDonald's or something like that, you can get, $100,000 if you're lucky. So people try it. In Spain, you're very unlikely to win that type of case.
Do any high profile cases or trials stick in your mind?
Yes, the famous trial, let's say it was about 5 or 10 years ago from when we're recording, of the famous...
Thinking of Barcenas?
No. Well, that's a famous case, but I'm thinking of the American case of O.J. Simpson. That was a very high-profile case because he was still is, a very well-known celebrity in American society. He had been a famous baseball player and then an actor, and he was accused of killing his wife. There seemed to be a lot of evidence that pointed to, but he was cleared. He was acquitted, and this bothered a lot of people. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. And there was a similar case of the South African Olympic contender who, did he run on false legs? Do you remember that guy who was accused? He was accused of killing his wife.
That's right.
Or his girlfriend.
And he did admit that he shot her.
Yeah.
But he said accidentally.
Because he thought it was a burglar.
Yeah. I think eventually he did go to prison for that, didn't he? I think he did.
Yes. Yes, I think he did. But that was another high-profile case. Well, now it's your turn to practice your English. Do you agree with what we've said? And what's the situation, the legal situation in your country? What would you like to improve on? Why not send us a voice message? Practice these legal vocabulary items and tell us what you think. Practice your legal vocabulary. Send us a message on speakpipe.com/inglespodcast or directly on the webpage at inglespodcast.com. Reza, how can they get in touch by email?
By email, you can get in touch with Craig at inglespodcast.com, or I'm at belfastreza@gmail.com.
And we'd like to take a moment to thank our wonderful Patreon supporters who support the podcast and the transcriptions of the podcast. You can find all their names on the website for every episode. Special thanks to Bruno, our gold sponsor, who offers walking tours of Copenhagen. So if you're listening to the podcast and you're in Copenhagen or thinking of going, go to copenhagenwalkingtour.com and why not book a tour of the city in English or in Spanish. Also, if you're in Rio, the Favela Walking Tour, led by Bruno's local guides, take you safely around the community and also help to support the community financially. Go to Bruno's websites to find out more. The Favela one is favelawalkingtour.com.br.
If you're interested, you too could become a Patreon sponsor for as little as $1 per month. That will get you instant access to recent transcriptions of the audio, transcriptions lovingly transcribed by Angelica Bello. Have a look at www.patreon.com/English podcast for more information on that.
And new Patreon supporters this month include Beatriz Galashi, Alberto Valverde Conde, and José Luis Hernandez. Thank you for joining us, and please forgive us if you don't hear your name immediately as a new subscriber, because we do record these podcasts in advance. What's next week, Reza?
Next week's episode is about to tip or not to tip. That is the question.
Tipping in restaurants and cafes, what do you do? Find out next week what we think. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.